When we treat ourselves as if we're worthy of being seen, heard, and valued because we're doing it for ourselves, and here's the key, we do it without guilt or shame. We put ourselves in a state of, I am the authority of my life. God is the authority. God within me, source within me is the authority of my life, and I follow this guidance. And what I've seen is that if we will do this, not only are we living in this prosperity consciousness, but we become that example for the people around us. Because I know when I was living in the low worthiness quotient, I was taking my anger, my pain out on everyone else. And especially as a mother, what I know now, I did a TEDx a year or so ago, and it was talking about how children internalize their parents' actions. So we think, oh, I'm doing the right thing for my kids. But what I know now is that when I'm angry, when I'm in lack, one, I'm going to project my lack onto my children and try to make them fit the mold of what I think they should be. But when I'm internalizing things or when I'm angry or sad or resentful, depressed, a child will take on the belief that says, I did this. I must have caused mommy or daddy to be unhappy. And so what now this child does is start feeling bad on the inside. And what do? They step right in that low worthiness quotient column and get on that hamster wheel of trying to prove their worth. So our greatest gift as women is to say, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to move over here into prosperity consciousness and become that example for our loved ones. And if you don't have a family, our friends, our parents, our siblings, our coworkers, you become the change that you want to see in the world just by loving yourself.
Very welcome, everybody, to this new episode. And I have a wonderful woman with me. She won Miss USA in 1982. And what I feel was very special, she almost gave back the crown. Can you imagine? I think that has a little bit to do with worthiness. And I think we will discover this conversation during our conversation, why it was a reason why she would give back her crown. And during the years, she is now a TEDx speaker. She is a keynote speaker. She is as well a businesswoman because she is co-owner of Jumping Goat Coffee Roasters in Helen, Cleveland, and in Cleveland, as far as I know. And this is not everything, because she is as well a spiritual coach and an intuitive healer. And her passion is women leaders of love. And I'm really honored. We met each other last year already in Huntington Beach during our book launch, where we as well participated. But we can talk about this later. Now let's invite and say hello to the dearest Terri Britt. Hello, Terri. How are you?
When you just said your passion is women leaders of love, it was so interesting because I always think of my passion as healing and spiritual growth. But when you said women leaders of love, because it was a divine download that I got years ago, it hit me that my passion is about helping women shift their consciousness into a high state of worthiness to claim their crowns so that they break the generational cycle of stress and struggle for their families. And and it really is, I hadn't thought about it as my passion is women leaders of love. But just now when I said it again, I got woo, it really is. I mean, yes, it's my community, but it's been more focused on, okay, my passion is helping these women grow spiritually to really empower themselves. But it is, I love women. And I can tell you there was a time in my life that I couldn't stand women. And because I thought they were mean and competitive, and I was competitive, I had issues with my mother. So for me, it was like women were hard. And then one day I realized, I remember when the Women Leaders of Love name came through, I was at a conference and this woman and I were talking, and she said, I said something about, well, women leaders of love. And she literally said, if you don't grab that URL, I am, because that's brilliant. And I went, oh, I have to go check on it. And when I checked on it and I started looking at what do I feel about women? Well, I don't like women. And then I got, no, they don't like me because women are in lack. And then I realized that went back to an old programming with my mother in a moment when she was angry saying, I love you, but I don't like you. Why can't you be more like your sister? And so that trauma of that had filtered into my whole being of that I was not likable. And so when I cleared that out, really cleared it out, I was like, no, I love women and I love helping empower them to live fully, to live, just being in all that they are, so they do break the generational cycle of lack, stress, and struggle.
Yeah, this is wonderful. And I personally could feel it when we were together and we lived in an Airbnb house together. It was fun, and one can feel when one get in touch with you. And this issue with women, I know it as well from my company experiences. I had a lot. Um, it's not useful, for example,
Beautiful.
to be in competitive state, and we don't need to have this
Right.
because every woman has so unique gifts to give to the world as you do. And let's give us a glimpse. Why would you wanted to give back the crown back then?
Oh, well, so I had a boyfriend and I grew up very dysfunctional. I grew up believing that love meant you deny yourself. That's how my parents lived. They denied themselves. They put my sister and me first, then each other next, and themselves last. And so was taught that this was love. Even though they were doing so much for me, what I learned was that love means that you must deny yourself. And so that's how I lived. I lived that way. But I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to be valued. I wanted to be loved. So I followed my boyfriend to a college that didn't have a broadcasting department. And yet my greatest desire was to be a broadcaster, a television broadcaster. So here I was in that self-denial. Well, then I am miserable. I am trying to beat him up at times because he's not making me feel loved, right? So finally, one day we had broken up for a split second, and I was at home for the weekend talking to a friend about how much I hated school. He said, well, so don't go. And I said, I have to. And he said, says who? And that's when it hit me that I was not doing what I needed to be doing. I needed to leave school. My intuition kicked in. And so I quit school. My boyfriend and I got back together. Okay. So now I was like, okay, now we're kind of going on this a journey together. And we were talking marriage. We had actually been kind of making plans. I decided to go into Miss Arkansas on a whim, win Miss Arkansas. 2 weeks later, I'm sent to Miss USA and I won, which was just astonishing. And my whole world just blew up. And all I could think of in that moment on stage is, of course, I was excited. I mean, if you look at pictures of me winning, my mouth is literally as big as the Grand Canyon. And and what's so funny about it, it's still talked about to this day that it is one of the most crazy or craziest reactions as a Miss USA title holder. I mean, I literally was like, ah, like this because I'm going, oh my gosh. And then the next moment I felt emptiness. And then the next moment I looked into the audience where I knew my boyfriend was sitting and I felt guilty because here we'd been talking about marriage, we'd been making all these plans, and I knew that winning Miss USA was going to send me to New York City, which is a long way from Cabot, Arkansas, population 4,000, and my boyfriend was going to be left behind there. So I had this sense of extreme guilt that I was going to cause him to suffer if I received this crown. And so that night, I sat in my hotel room with my family and my boyfriend and discussed giving the crown back. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but that's the way I was raised, is that to be loving, you must deny yourself. I mean, were you ever raised that way? Because most women that I've been coaching now for 25 years, and most women have it somewhere in their core that it is not okay to receive, that to be loving, I must put everybody else first at the expense of myself. And when we do that, we don't claim our crowns. And that's what happened for me that night. I won the crown but I didn't claim it. And it, even though I won and I ended up keeping the title that year, by the end of the year, I had won $150,000 in cash and prizes. Half of it was cash. My dad, I'd given my money to invest. He had lost all of it. So I had to sell most of my prizes to pay the taxes. So at the end of the year, I had very little to show for being Miss USA. I didn't make connections like I needed to. I just, I was in the state of unworthiness. And in that state of unworthiness, your outer world always mirrors your inner world energetically. And in that state of unworthiness, all of my money disappeared. So literally just months after giving up the crown, because every year, you have to give it to the next person, I'm moved to Los Angeles and I am driving an ugly duckling rent-a-car. Okay. I'm living in a rented apartment in the middle of Hollywood at that time, and it may still be, but it was gun violence all the time. I had ugly plaid furniture in this furnished little apartment. I mean, I went from winning, living in New York City in the upper high, higher end of town, beautiful area of New York City, first class seats, to driving an ugly duckling rent-a-car because I couldn't receive this kind of abundance.
Yeah. And this is so often the case
Mhm.
because, especially women, as you mentioned, we are not used to receive. And you said you have to deny, or and I know many cases as well, it was with me, you have to work hard to be
Oh,
seen.
yeah.
Yeah, so you have to work, you have to do always something so that you are worthwhile, what is yeah, for you there to receive, and then you can't
Yes,
receive because you still think you haven't done enough, isn't it?
exactly. Oh my gosh, that is so true. When I was and that to me is also the male energy because I had watched my dad do that. He worked himself to death, worked himself to death, worked himself to death. And as a kid, he was the hero in our home because he was the breadwinner. So I valued him more than my mother's way of being. And I also saw her as kind of being depressed because she wasn't living fully. So at a young age, I thought, well, I want to be seen, heard, and valued like my dad. So I started working really hard. And that's why I was working hard to be the best girlfriend. I was working hard to be the best daughter, but I was also working hard to be the best student. Graduated second in my class. I was president of this, president of that, went to college on scholarship. None of it made me joyful. And if anything, it kept me on this perpetual hamster wheel of always struggling, of always trying to prove my worth. And that's why I would get so angry. I mean, literally, I tried to beat up my boyfriend just months before winning Miss USA. Can you imagine? I mean, I tried to put my fist in his kitchen window. I would smack him around. And I mean, it was so bad, right? Because I was so disconnected. And I was telling you about my dad. Well, I did my Miss USA stint. I actually ended up working in the television industry, what's now the E channel. I don't know if you get that in Germany, but I know it's international. But I, got to cover, it was movie time back then, but I got to cover the Cannes Film Festival and the Academy Awards and, and interview all these celebrities. But it was an up and coming business at that time. So I was always trying to get new gigs and I would get right to the final person, like between me and someone else, and then I wouldn't get it. It was like I couldn't break through my glass ceilings. There was always this sense of I couldn't receive. So I finally left television to become a wife and mom. It was so funny because I'd always said I'll never have children. I don't want kids, don't want anything to do with them. And at 27, I got to have a kid. I got to have a kid. There was like this sense of inside of me. So I ended up getting married to my late husband. We were married for 17 years and he had his son who was about 5, and then we had 2 little girls. And what I found myself was trying to make my children be the best. like you said, to work hard. Now the little ones were too little, but with my stepson, trying to make him be the best, trying to do, everything right. And we would have these conflicts. I'd be screaming at him and I couldn't stand myself. And then, as my kids were getting a little bit older, I didn't want to be that for them. Well, it was in 95 that my dad died. And my dad, who had been my hero, who was the one who was so valued, had lost everything in bankruptcy, had started drinking himself to death and smoking himself to death, and to the point where he died at the age of 54 of lung cancer. And through his death, I started looking at myself. I got into therapy and I realized that I was perpetuating a cycle for my family, just like my dad had done, and my mom too. But at that time, my focus was on my dad. They both denied themselves. They both had no permission to receive love, nurturing, and support from the people around them, from the universe. It was always, I have to perform, I have to perform, I have to work harder, I have to be the best. My mom's was, I have to be the best wife and mom, I have to do this. So it was this hamster wheel that daddy lived on and that I was living on, and I was trying to put my children on. And I was also expecting my husband to do the same. And I realized through therapy that that performance was a lack of forgiveness for oneself. It was a lack of acceptance for my humanness. It was a lack of love for myself. And I just said, no more. I'm done. I am not perpetuating the cycle. And it was so cool because my therapist said, you were wound really tight. You need to get into meditation. And I did. I ended up at an energy school, a psychic school of all things. Didn't know that I had any psychic gifts, didn't know that I could work with energy. And all of a sudden, it was like, my passions are like getting on fire. I knew I loved a lot of things and I knew that I was pretty good at a lot of things, but I didn't feel that fire other than being a mom and and then to learn about this energy. And what was so cool is in classes when we were learning to read people, the teacher would say, you and you have matching pictures. She wouldn't tell you what it is. She said, go do your healing, go do the, clear the energy. And then when you are triggered, that's when you found your matching picture and you go within and clean it up. Well, as the more I would go within and clean up my matching pictures, I started feeling more peaceful, more joyful, more calm. And then I was guided to bring those tools into my home. And it was profound, profound of how my family shifted. Because, at that point, when I was always trying to be good and trying to be best, I wasn't receiving love. And so I was trying to make my husband love me. I was keep making him responsible for filling me up and starting to find myself doing that with my kids. Because this is what we do as parents. We tend to, we're giving so much that we want them to make us feel loved. And then when you don't, you get angry. So that's what I was doing. And instead of doing that, I got guided. No, when you're reacting, when you're not feeling loved, see it as a gift. Go within and see what your outer world is matching to your inner world. And I started using those energetic tools to clean up myself. Well, let me tell you, everything shifted. My hubby and I got our passion back. Our kids quit fighting. Our home became so much more peaceful. It was the coolest thing to see. And I finally realized at that point that it had been my performance, all those years of trying to be the best wife, mom, student, whatever you call it. It was that performance that made me so neurotic and controlling. But it was when I was loving myself and releasing beliefs about how I thought I should be and really owning my worth for who I am and the way I was created that I became more peaceful, joyful, accepting, and loving. And that overflowed to the people around me. And thus is where the Women Leaders of Love community was born.
That's wonderful. It's a wonderful story, and it's a wonderful example that when you have expectations, you put projections on others, and so you put a lot of pressure on others because
Mm.
of the lack inside of yourself. And has everything to do with worthiness, and because we are not raised to be worthy, so that we are okay, we don't have to do anything and we are okay, we don't have to do anything and we are beauty. So, and
Yes.
this is something just we as women have to encourage women to step into this kind of energy. And this is what I think is as well aligning with the soul,
Yes.
and as well be guided to your intuition. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you as well wrote a chapter in our book Women Gone Wild about intuition. So what does it mean to you when we talk about intuition?
Oh my gosh. You know what's been so interesting is that what I have found over the years is that when I performed, when I was trying to be the best, I was in ego. I was in survival consciousness, what I call poverty consciousness. And in that poverty consciousness, you're in a low energetic vibration. You're in shame and guilt, saying, who I am is not enough. So you're always grasping, and life feels hard because you attract things that feel hard. But when you love yourself unconditionally and you start letting go of that need to perform, what happens is you align with your soul. I call it aligning with God, the same thing. You align with your soul. And in that connection, you start feeling worthy. You start feeling loved and supported. And because of that, your survival energies start flooding away or just dissipating. And you get into this high vibration where you start attracting this beautiful abundance. And what happens is you begin to trust it. And as you trust it, you get more and more messages that you are now trusting your intuition. And I'll never forget one of the first times that I was doing this. This was way back when I just started training. We had bought a house that was just being built. And if you've ever bought a house, you know, they sometimes the design is already done, but we got to pick a few things, but the light fixtures and things were already put in. So when we moved in, I realized that the back light on the back porch was burned out and I needed to change it, but I didn't know anything about this light fixture. And all I saw were all these little knobs. It was like it was an octagonal piece of a lamp that had glass panes, and between each one was metal with little knobs. So I get on my ladder and I'm going up there and I start unscrewing it. And I'm going, the whole thing's coming apart in my hands. I'm like, so I screw it back up and I sit there and I just get grounded for a moment and I open up to receive. I feel this nudge to go higher on the ladder. So I go higher on the ladder and look at the top of the fixture and see two more knobs, but they are what open up the top so that I can go within and change the light bulb. That moment, it sounds so trivial, but was just truly profound for me because I got grounded that if I will just sit down and open up to receive, that I can get intuitive guidance. And so that wasn't a thing that I was really emotional about, but it was an anchor for me to know that. So when I started dealing with my family, when I started dealing with businesses eventually, that if I would take the moments to get grounded, to get open up and receptive, and if I was being emotional, to clear out the emotions, to clear out the belief that was causing the emotions, then I could come back to neutrality, just like I used to be in the psychic school when I was learning to read people. You had to get back to neutrality. You had to clear out your crap before you could go back and read it. Well, by doing this, by saying, okay, I'm in emotional chaos, I'm in survival, I'm in poverty consciousness, let me go in and clean it out. Then I can get into a state of worthiness and a state of receptivity. And now my intuition can come in with clarity and ease. And it makes life so much easier. You know that. It's like
Mhm.
when you get into that state of receptivity and in a high state of worthiness, your intuition starts kicking in and there's signs from all around you. I mean, I live in the mountains of Georgia, and so I've had bears in my yard every day this week, and I have possums and snakes and all these hawks go flying by, and it's so cool because I know there's messages there, but there's also messages in the music. There's also messages on TV. There's messages in conversations. And so your intuition starts paying attention as you get out of that poverty consciousness and what I call prosperity consciousness to really be in a high state of receptivity, a high state of worthiness. So now that your intuition can really guide you in your life with a lot more grace and ease.
Yeah. And this is as well, it's a matter of energy and frequency. So the higher
Yes.
the frequency, the more you can receive automatically, and you don't have to look for it. It finds you. You know,
Yes. It,
it's just there. It's
it
just
comes flooding in. It
yeah.
comes flooding in. And I tell you, when we talk about my community, the Women Leaders of Love community, what's so cool about this is I've seen that as I have lived this way, both my late husband of 17 years and my husband now of 16 years, Charlie, have started to live this way because of my example.
Mm.
And so that's what women leaders of love
Yeah.
means. And I'll never forget Charlie. This has been several years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I'm sitting on the couch downstairs and I was just kind of in a quiet space and I see him walking down from his office because we both have offices in our home. And he's walking downstairs, he's crying. And I see his chin trembling. And he said, "You know, I always knew you loved me, but until you taught me to love myself, I couldn't receive your love, but now I do."
Wow.
You know, we think that if I deny myself and love you, then you'll love me in return. But this creates walls and resentment, like I talked about. But when I loved myself and really have stood in my truth, giving myself a voice, creating boundaries, following my passions, exploring my gifts, doing deep inner work, I've encouraged him to do the same. He's not responsible for filling me up. Instead, I've encouraged him to fill himself up, right? But when you do that, there's a freedom in that you're no longer performing, that you can open up more. And it creates a deeper sense of intimacy, which is amazing to have that with your partner. And it allows each other to receive the love. So it's like the icing on the cake, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you love yourself, and so you're already feeling so full, but then that love is grows exponentially because you're sharing the love with your partner. It's kind of like Beata when we were doing the book tour for Women Gone Wild, and we're in Times Square and we're seeing our pictures up on Times Square billboard. It was so cool, right? It was so dang cool. And it was interesting because I thought, you know, when I was comparing that to like winning Miss USA, winning Miss USA was awesome. You know, it was winning that, but then I felt this sense of, ugh. What was beautiful about Times Square to me is that it was a mirror to the joy I was already feeling on the inside. To see ourselves up there spreading messages of hope and inspiration for women all over the world, and to know that we were serving in our purpose. It felt so good to know this is a reflection of what's already going on inside of me. And
Yes.
that was a beautiful thing. That was so joyful for me to be in that state and to witness all the women in our group celebrating in that way and knowing how we were making an impact. So I don't know, did you feel that way?
Oh, wonderful. I enjoyed and loved dance with you all together on the Times Square in front of these billboards, these beasts, what they said, this biggest
The
fun ever.
bees?
And I said it's the time of my life because it was full of love, laughter, appreciation for each other. And we were 17 women, and there was no struggling and no nothing. So we were stick together, we did together, we danced together. It was just amazing. And I think this is the new earth, this is the vibration of the new earth
Yes.
with laughter and joy and sharing, and 17 women who has different gifts, and we shared them, and no one was guilty about each other. So it
No, and no
was
competition. It was no,
not
and that was what was so beautiful. And I think that group is a prime example of when we women love ourselves, when we clean up our crap that tells us we are not worthy, and that because it's that lack that causes us to compete, right? It's that lack that says, I want to tear you down to build myself up, or I'm just gonna, be in a little fetal position and not do anything. I mean, it is that lack of worth. But when we find our gifts, when we do the inner work, when we love ourselves, we get into such a high state because we're in our gifts, we're following our passions, and we want other people to feel the way we're feeling. And so, in that sense, you want to lift each other up. You want to celebrate each other. I mean, that's what I love about my Women Leaders of Love community is that it's a group of women who are saying, yes, we want to grow together. And I have a weekly it's a podcast, but it's a healing session is what it really is. And my Women Leaders of It Love community on Facebook is called Own Your Worth Wednesdays. And women come in and I do life coaching and energetic healing and stuff. But what's so cool is when somebody says, "Can I share something?"
Mhm.
And, because they're asking questions. And so they're all growing and learning from each other's questions. But when somebody has a big win, we're like, "Yay, that is so cool." And in the chat, you'll see people saying, "Way to go, way to go." And you can see that there's this true sense of we want to support each other. We don't want to be in this division. We don't want to be in this lack. We want to be in love. We want to be in love. I like
That's
that.
it. We want to be in love. We want to love ourselves. We want to love others. We want to appreciate others,
Yeah.
So the beauty in every person we see, and to discover this and to appreciate this is a gift in itself,
Oh, yeah.
I feel the more I see the beauty and the more I express how I see you as beauty, the more I'm cherishing myself, So that's wonderful. And so I want to come to a topic of yours because you did something special. You created a worthiness quotient.
Mhm.
So tell us what's all about. What is it?
So the worthiness quotient is how open you are to receiving love, nurturing support from the people around you, from the universe, from whatever you want to call it, source, God, whatever, simply for being you. It means no performing, no trying to get it right. It means I'm honoring and loving the way I was created. So a low worthiness quotient, if you imagine two columns, think of a low worthiness quotient column here. And in this column is where you're performing, where you're denying yourself, you're trying to get it right, do it right, you're taking care of everyone else, you're not giving yourself a voice. Well, here in this column, think of it as dark. Think of it as crumbling down. And this energy is all based in shame and guilt and then the negative emotions that go with that. And because you're holding that vibration, you are sending out this message that says, I am not worthy of receiving love, nurturing, and support. And so, because you're sending it out, that's what gets mirrored back to you. So, life feels hard. You don't feel seen or heard in your relationships, maybe at work. You're just feeling like I can't break through my glass ceilings, kind of like what I talked about when I was working in television. And so, this low worthiness quotient column is where, when we look at the world, that's where most people are are standing or sitting, maybe even curled up in a fetal position because it feels so hard. Now over here is the high worthiness quotient column. And this is the column where you're honoring and loving the way you were created. You're giving yourself a voice, you're setting boundaries, you're really doing deep work and looking at your gifts and your passions and you're following them. You're surrendering to the guidance because in this state you're getting a lot of intuitive guidance and you're honoring it and really moving into balance. And so because you're in this high state of loving yourself, now you're attracting things that mirror love, whether it's having your partner hear you, getting that raise, or maybe saying, this job is not a right place for me. I need to move and go somewhere else, and trusting that inner guidance to take the risk to go do it. Because so often when we're in a low worthiness quotient, we won't take a risk. We'll stay in this column over here and just feel stuck. So to get across this divide of lack is courage. Okay. It is courage to love yourself, to stand in your truth. And that's all it is courage each day to start saying, how do I love myself today? What do I need to do to honor and love the way I was created? And what I've seen is that if people have done this, like I have a worthiness quotient program, and as people have done this, their lives change so incredibly. And so, for instance, I have this one woman who, during the pandemic, I was beta testing this course, and I said, "Will you take it?" Well, she had just gotten furloughed from her company. Everybody shut down. She takes the course and is focusing on raising her worthiness, raising her vibration, moving into prosperity consciousness. She ends up carrying her whole company for the month of April when everything was shut down. She said, all of a sudden, business people were calling me. I was just doing business over the phone. And even though they had been told to go home and there was not going to be any work, she carried the whole company for the month of April. She goes, oh my gosh. She couldn't believe it, right? And so when we're focusing on not performing, because when we're performing and we're over here in this low worthiness quotient column, what we're doing is saying, I'm giving you the authority of my life. And I am telling and asking you to love me so I feel enough. But when we treat ourselves as if we're worthy of being seen, heard, and valued because we're doing it for ourselves, and here's the key, we do it without guilt or shame. We put ourselves in a state of, I am the authority of my life. God is the authority. God within me, source within me is the authority of my life, and I follow this guidance. And what I've seen is that if we will do this, not only are we living in this prosperity consciousness, but we become that example for the people around us. Because I know when I was living in the low worthiness quotient, I was taking my anger, my pain out on everyone else. And especially as a mother, what I know now, I did a TEDx a year or so ago, and it was talking about how children internalize their parents' actions. So we think, oh, I'm doing the right thing for my kids. But what I know now is that when I'm angry, when I'm in lack, one, I'm going to project my lack onto my children and try to make them fit the mold of what I think they should be. But when I'm internalizing things or when I'm angry or sad or resentful, depressed, a child will take on the belief that says, I did this. I must have caused mommy or daddy to be unhappy. And so what now this child does is start feeling bad on the inside. And what do? They step right in that low worthiness quotient column and get on that hamster wheel of trying to prove their worth. So our greatest gift as women is to say, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to move over here into prosperity consciousness and become that example for our loved ones. And if you don't have a family, our friends, our parents, our siblings, our coworkers, you become the change that you want to see in the world just by loving yourself.
Yeah. And I believe that we women are in the position right now to break this cycle, to cut this cycle. This is why I, for example, as well, love to do the work with cutting the binds of ancestors, whatever that is. So
Yes.
it's so important, the work we do and the work you do. And you have a quiz for people to
Mhm.
take and to determine their worthiness quotient.
Yes, I do.
Where can they take it? I will take it too.
It's just terribritt.com/quiz. So it's TerriBritt.com/quiz. And yes, what you're going to do is it's got 8 different segments that you're going to go through this quiz. It's going to take you about 3 to 5 minutes. And because I really want you to go into the feeling, not what you would like things to look like, but what do you feel on the inside? Because feeling is key. That's going to tell you, is your worthiness quotient high or is it low? And you want to get honest with yourself, right? Because you want a real clear awareness of what's going on. So you're going to get a personalized report of your overall worthiness quotient, plus the 8 different segments, whether it's money, miracles, passions, relationships. There's all these different ones that you're going to look at. And you're going to get a breakdown of each of those. And then you're going to get some steps that you can do to begin today to start raising your worthiness. And I love it because I've had people write to me and go, oh, Terri, I just took the quiz and I thought I was really loving myself. And I realized I've got to step up my game into self-love. And then I say, I'll write them back and say, do it again in 6 months. And I've had people do that and they come back in 6 months going, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. My worthiness quotient went up. So it's kind of fun. It gives you a great barometer of seeing, where am I holding or where am I, holding my vibration? What am I emitting out into the world? And how has that shifted since I'm loving myself and owning my worth?
And this is a free
Totally
thing.
free.
You
Totally
just
free.
give it back to free to the world. And so if somebody wants to work then with you, he can contact you as well because
Yes.
you're giving coaching sessions as
Yes,
well.
I'm giving coaching sessions. And so when you take the quiz, you'll be invited into the course, the Worthiness Quotient course, which is really cool. You'll be invited to a free webinar if you want to know more about my story. And then you'll have some different access there. If you need to get in touch with me, you can go to info@terribritt.com for coaching, and my assistant will set it up for you, and get us all set up. But yeah, no, it's so much fun. I love doing this. Can I share one last little story just to show you how it makes a difference? So several years ago, you mentioned earlier that we own Jump and Goat Coffee Roasters and Tasting Room, and or Jump and Goat Coffee Roasters, and then we have two stores. We have a regular little store, and then we have a full-blown tasting room at the base of a mountain, 7.5 acres. Instagram influencer came through this year, and we have now 2.7 million views on that Instagram, her influencers page, or on that reel. So it just kind of blew up. And so what happened was the way the second store came about, because we had this little bitty store, is I had my husband listen to a meditation on poverty consciousness versus prosperity consciousness, low worthiness quotient versus a high worthiness quotient. And when he got done with the meditation, he said, I'm in poverty consciousness. And I said, why? He said, well, I want wholesale business, but I don't want to be on the road anymore, because he was going out and selling our coffees, because we're in wine country, to a lot of the wineries, to private label and hotels and Airbnbs. And he was doing all this stuff just on the road constantly. He says, I want to be at home with you and the dogs. I'm done. And here's the key. He did that without shame or guilt. When he said, I'm done, he knew that he had to take a stand for loving himself without shame or guilt. Well, you know what happened? All of a sudden, all this wholesale business comes flooding in. I mean, it was like boom, boom, boom. It still floods in to this day. And then a few months later, the property that we have, our big space, our big tasting room, it became available. It was an old building, an old motorcycle church on 7.5 acres, looking straight up at this mountain, looking over cow pastures, beautiful. And I remember the day he came in, and he's giddy. He's giddy because he's saying yes to loving himself. And he goes, oh my gosh, I saw this property. It's my dream. I've always wanted to have a place where people could come and have an experience. Well, we ended up buying the property, and we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary. And as I said, we had an Instagram influencer come through this last year and have 2.7 million views. Our whole business, I mean, we're about 90 minutes outside of Atlanta, which is a big city here in the States for those who are in Germany. And we have people coming from south of Atlanta, Atlanta. It is the coolest thing. And the reason it is so cool is because I know it started with me. I know that as I have loved myself and encouraged my husband to love himself, and then encouraged him to receive love, to take a stand for prosperity consciousness, for a high worthiness quotient, he got to say no to the things that didn't feel good to him anymore. And he got to say yes to his purpose, to his passions, to his creativity. It is the coolest thing to see that you make this kind of impact on the people around you when you love yourself.
Yeah, when you love yourself, you are so connected with the soul, and this is what we
Mhm.
are all together. And
Mhm.
and then this vibration spreads out into the world. And so
Exactly.
we do changes over changes and over changes in loving ourselves. And this has nothing to do with the so-called ego. It's just the expression of who we really are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like the ego has really dissipated for both of us over the years, and we just want to spread joy. When we want to spread love, people come to Jump and Goat, and I'm not down there that much, but when I go down there, especially on the weekends when we have music, I got people up dancing. I mean, people want to come and just be in that energy of acceptance. I mean, everybody's accepted, every religion, every faith, every culture. I mean, it is a hodgepodge. And that was our goal. Actually, when we got married, my company is actually called Enlightened Family Institute. And so when we got married, we committed to being an enlightened couple, an enlightened family, and to spreading that message. And it's so wonderful to see people come there with their families, with their partners, with their friends, and to feel it. People walk away going, oh, this is the most beautiful energy to be in.
Mhm.
And it's because we set that tone for it.
Yes, yes. You are the creator of this energy field, which is
Mhm.
spreading out. And
Yeah.
you are a very creative woman because you created as well a song. And this is the abundance song I discovered on your website. Tapping into the divine with the abundance song.
It
And
is.
I
It's so
really
funny.
would love to listen to this song now.
Mm. It's so funny because you have to understand one of the beliefs I've had to work through is that I couldn't sing. And I still wouldn't say that I'm a singer, but at least I will now sing because used to I wouldn't sing at all. I was so afraid of it. And I remember one day because we had these two big giant dogs. They both passed away last year. But I was sitting in my bedroom on the floor, rubbing their bellies, and I was always singing to my dogs, just like I did with my children. And then whatever the beat was, it changed. It not the beat, but the words changed, and I started singing, I receive abundance simply for being me. I give and receive it freely with grace and ease. I receive abundance simply for being me. I give and receive it freely with grace and ease. One last time. I receive abundance simply for being me. I give and receive it freely with grace and ease.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. This is really in Germany you say Ohrwurm. I try to I don't know in English something what you always hear in your ears.
Yes.
How do you say it?
Well, here we'd probably say it's like a little ditty, that
Yeah.
it's like
Okay.
a little ditty gets in your brain and it stays with you. And I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
people write to me and
It's
say, I would, this woman wrote to me one day. She was so funny. She says, I think it was on social media. She goes, Terri, I've been singing your song, and all of a sudden I realized that I heard my husband singing it.
yeah. This song could go around the world now, spreading it out. Abundance, the abundance song. It's great. I love it.
Oh, thank you for, it's so funny because I don't sing it on a daily basis because I just kind of live it. But there was a period of time when I felt like I was singing it more because I really wanted to take a stand of getting my vibration up. And singing is such a beautiful thing, right? It helps
So,
your vagus nerve get calmed down. I mean, it helps everything in your whole being. So I was like, well, I just started singing it and then I felt like I was integrating it, on a deep, deep level. But yeah, it's a fun song. I forget about it all the time. But yes, I need to put it out there and help, let people start singing it with
yeah,
me.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
So,
thank you for that.
yeah, dear Terry, before we end our wonderful talk, we could talk. I think we could talk about hours, but I have two final questions for you.
Okay.
The first is, what do you, what is your wish for the world?
Hmm.
And the second is, what is the wish and the want for you for yourself?
So my wish for the world is that this divide that we feel all over our world right now, we're in a birthing. I think we're in a, huge transformation that people would recognize that the pathway to peace is through self-love and owning your worth, and that they would do the work because so few people are doing the work because they're so busy thinking I've got to make things happen. And instead, if they would love themselves and get into a high vibration, then they would allow themselves to receive the abundance that is there. They would claim their crown. So that's my wish for the world. My wish for myself is to bring this message out on a larger level. This wonderful opportunity to speak with you. I am in the throes of writing my next book, which will be, I believe, called The Worthiness Quotient, Claim Your Crown, Lead a Life You Love. So to walk with that with grace and ease and to allow it to come through me and then for it to go out into the world. And then my other books, The Enlightened Mom, which won Best Spiritual Book of the Year in 2011, for it to touch mothers, specific to mothers. And my original book, which was how I awakened and started seeing the outer world to my inner world. It's actually my journal called Message Sent, to see those books really touch people's lives. I've seen it on a certain scale, but I'd love for it to touch the masses because I believe that we each have a divine path, and this has been my divine path, and who would have ever thought that? winning Miss USA. Never thought that, but it has been that, and I celebrate it and I want to share it.
Yeah. And so everything else is there to be shared.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
So thank you so much, Terri, for your time. Thank you for being. Thank you for all the work you do for us, for the world, for the people, for the women. And I hope I see you soon. I come
Yes.
to the US then.
Thank you, Beata. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey and tell others about this channel. And please subscribe.